Welcome back to Floss Law. All right, we're on day 8 now. This is the one you guys have been waiting for. Day 8 of my 10 days for the next 10 years. 10 days worth of real estate videos of what you need to know to become a real estate investor for the next 10 years. So when we hit 2030, when we hit the next decade, you'll be a real estate investor. You won't still be sitting on the sidelines. Today's day 8. As I promised, private investors, private money, what do you need to know? I get this question all the time. I've had a lot of people asking about this video. Today's the day. Today's private investor day. We are going to strip away a lot of misconceptions of what a private investor is and is not, and how it works in a real estate deal. So, got my tea and my water here. We're ready to go. This might be a long one. There's a lot of ground to cover. It's a very simple topic on its surface, very complicated once you get underneath. So, private investors, we're going to do the who, what, where, when, and why. Well, the when's easy. We can get that out of the way. There's investors everywhere all the time. So the when is kind of, we can disregard that. But the important is the who, what do I have? Well, we're going to go out of order here. We have what, who, why, and where. So what is it? Who are they? Why do they do it? And where do you find them? So we're going to put a profile together of you as the investor, trying to get private money, and then we're building a profile of the private investor so you can understand who both people are, how you can bring them together. And then tomorrow I think we're going to do partnerships so we can understand how we build that deal once we get the investor and the private money person together, bring them together. How do we craft that deal? How do we put together that joint venture or partnership? But today, it's all about private money. This is literally the $1 million question in real estate. So let's start out with what a private investor is. Private investor is someone obviously with cash that they want to deploy into a real estate deal. It could be a long-term real estate deal. The first misconception is that someone that just wants to do fix and flips. Not necessarily. So someone who wants to invest in real estate, they might want exposure in a fix and flip. They might want exposure in an apartment building, in a rental property, in any number of different types of real estate investments. So it's not just for fix and flips. Typically, we see private investors attracted to fix and flips because the high turnover rate of the money, they get their money paid back more frequently, so they know that their investment's secured, and they're getting a higher interest rate. So they're making a lot of profit off of their money. But they're not always a cash investor. And in fact, very, very, very rarely do we get a private investor who's someone who just has cash on hand. So I see this misconception all the time. This is the next misconception of private investing. That you're going to find this person somewhere that just has a ton of money, has $1 million sitting in their account, and you're going to use it. Well, people who are wealthy that have $1 million don't just have $1 million sitting dead in their bank accounts. That's not necessarily how it works. You might find someone that just recently liquidated something or came into some money, in which case they have liquid assets ready to deploy. But a lot of times it's not how it works. Most of the time, your private investor, private money, is going to be someone who has money in like an IRA or a 401k, and they either want to diversify their portfolio or just don't want to have their money in the stock market altogether. They think it's going to crash. They want to get out of that into something more stabilized like real estate, or they want to diversify, so they have so much money in their 401k IRA. They're like, look, I have everything riding on the stock market, which can ebb and flow constantly. So I want to keep some of it in there, but I like to have some of it in a different asset class, in a different sort of structure. And they want to look at real estate. So that's a huge portion of the investment community. Are usually people using retirement money to invest in these deals. They also make great private investors because if you know about using a self-directed 401k or IRA, meaning you take money from your IRA or 401k, and you put it into a special account, we call it self-directed, where you can then direct where you want that money to go to. You're not obligated to keep it in your mutual fund. It goes into the separate account that you can now write checks from, and you can fund an LLC or a property or a joint venture or something like that. You can invest in a group. You can do any number of different things with it. So now you're getting exposure to real estate. It's a huge portion of a lot of the private money that we get. We also get people who are cash investors that are using some form of a line of credit. A line of credit is liquid money, but it's not your money, it's the bank's money. So what you do is you go to a bank and you say, I want to buy auctions, I want to buy something where I don't want to have to go through the underwriting process. I just want to have cash. I want to have cash on hand. They go through an approval process. They're still going to look at your finances. They want to see a heavy amount of cash flow going through the accounts with that bank. Typically, it's with the bank, you already have some sort of account set up with it. They could see a lot of cash on hand. They could see a lot of assets that you hold with that bank. Sometimes it could be, some sort of investment or something you have within the bank already that you can use as collateral, or you could just show that you have either a personal or business account that has a heavy amount of cash flow, where they could see that you have funds flowing through that bank. And then they set you up with a separate account where you can, you have this account and it has $50,000 in it, and you could just go on your app on your phone, you could go into the bank, do whatever, and at any particular time you could just pull that $50,000 out as if it were cash in your account. Now, as soon as you pull that cash out, you're accruing interest on that money. Now, it's typically a minimal amount of interest, so if you take that money out, apply it to an investment, you're making money on investment. If you put the money back into that line of credit account, you should still be coming out with a profit. So we get a lot of people who use some variation of a line of credit where it's not cash out of their pocket, they're using the bank's money, but it's almost like cash. You just draw it out as if it was cash. You just pull it out and use it for whatever you want to use it for. You just have to put the money back at some point. And then we get people who have sort of like a baby real estate fund. You might get 2, 3, 4 partners that come together, and they have their money together, pulled together to buy properties or do whatever they want to do. They may decide that they want to do their own fix and flip or invest in their own apartment building, and then they may have situations where they say, we just want to invest in other people. We're sort of figuring out what we want to do, or we're maximizing on the amount of time that we can spend on this. So we want to diversify our own fund, and maybe we'll invest in you before we find our own deal. You can also, sometimes private investors are other real estate professionals. So a private investor might be someone, and you don't think to pitch another guy doing or girl doing rehabs or something like that they want to be a private investor. But sometimes we run into situations where we have a person who actively maybe fix and flips houses, but when you're doing that, it can be very intensive. It can take up a lot of your time, and they may say, look, I'd like to take a month or 2 off, go spend some time with my family, go on vacation, just have a month where I'm not constantly stressed out all the time. So I'm interested in just funding someone else's deal. I'll take a chunk of the profits on their deal. We'll do like a partnership, but they're in charge of taking care of everything, and I can kind of take some time to chill out and relax a little bit. The only problem with that is typically when you have a private investor, you want to be able to, when you cash them out, immediately reapply the funds to a next investment. And when you partner up with someone like that, obviously the risk there is when you complete that investment, there's a high potential there that they're going to redeploy that money into one of their own investments. So you're not going to have the opportunity to then turn around and redeploy that money into your next project. So part of the idea and the beauty of doing a private investor is you, as the person who's doing the rehab or whatever, you're borrowing this money, you're completing the project. As soon as the project's done, you want to have the next project lined up, so the money is going back to the investor, but you're almost immediately redeploying it into the next property, or the money is going directly from the sale of the one property straight to the purchase of the next property. So the investor is getting their interest payments, usually getting like either a monthly, quarterly, or yearly interest payment, depending on what your deal is. But the actual principal is constantly being redeployed, so that the investor can just keep going, or the investor meaning the person doing the rehab. The private investor sometimes never touches their money. They just want to see the settlement statements to know that that money's there, but they don't need to physically have it, going in and out of their account. Depends on the relationship with the two people. Who is a private investor? So let's identify who a private investor is. Obviously, the number one thing is, you're looking at high net worth individuals. So that's the first thing that everyone's going after. You're looking for people who have really, really high paying jobs, or just come from very wealthy families or whatever. They have a high net worth where they have cash on hand, where they may want to invest in properties. I mean, that's the first thing that everyone always goes after. Obviously, I like to target people that have good jobs. Particularly, again, coming back around, we get a lot of people with the 401ks and IRAs. So if someone has a good high-paying job, particularly once they get a little bit higher up in age, they probably have a very high 401k, or if they've changed jobs, they rolled it over into an IRA. They have a lot of money in there. They might want to diversify a little bit. So that, again, is a very popular thing that we get as far as people that are interested in investment. I would say on average, this isn't gospel, but on average, I would say, usually when I get contacted by someone who's interested in deploying 401k or IRA funds for real estate investment, typically they're operating with a dollar figure somewhere around, I would say, between $30,000 to $50,000. That's typical. I would say like 35,000 is really kind of the sweet spot. It feels like the majority of the time that I get someone calling me that's interested in that, and I say, well, how much are you playing with? And they say, I have about 35,000. I want to commit to this. That seems to be around the average number that I deal with, but it could vary anywhere from as low as 20,000, which can be difficult because that's not a lot of money when you're dealing with like a rehab, up to $50,000, which that's very easy to deploy, because that's generally around the rehab budget a lot of times you're working with. So those are a lot of the people that we see. Other investors, and I already touched on this, other investors that maybe want to take a vacation, they want to take a break, they're burnt out, and they just need a little bit of time to recover a little bit. I've had investors, unfortunately, get very ill, again, because of overexhaustion, really, just when you're doing these fix and flip rehabs, especially if it gets to the point where you have a lot of them. I've seen investors just flat out work themselves to exhaustion and be in the hospital because they're just their stress level is on 10, and then they're constantly running around worrying about what's going on with the contractors, worried about stuff with the property. Oh my God, are we going to be able to sell it and still make a profit? Are we going to break even or lose money? And they work themselves into a hospital bed, unfortunately. So sometimes we have to say, look, you need to just take a break. You need to take a break, take a breather. It's okay. You have good team members around you. We'll be able to get this done. Like, you got to take care of yourself first and foremost. And occasionally, we do get the investor that gets maybe a family inheritance or won the lottery or something like that. That's kind of few and far between. We don't get a ton of those. So don't bank on that. The lottery thing's pretty rare. Inheritance, every once in a blue moon, we get someone that comes in with some money from inheritance. But I would say more often than not, usually when people get a large money from inheritance, it's hard to get them to focus on doing real estate investment, and they start, buying a boat or something. They want to go through the money. They want to do fun stuff with the money. So sometimes it can be hard to get them to focus on, okay, well, now you've come into this money, you should use it for something good that you're going to continue to get income for the rest of your life. They come in saying they want to do that, and then when we follow up with them weeks later, they got a brand new car and, the money's gone. So that's who a private investor is. When I talk to someone who's interested in getting involved with private investing, one of the misconceptions and this is the next set of misconceptions that we get, that I need to strip away from you in order for you to know how to do, find a private investor. In order to get a private investor, do a deal with a private investor. When I sit down with a private investor and they want to give someone money for a rehab or do whatever, I break it down like this. This is my personal opinion. I've been doing this for a while, so take it for what you will. This is my personal opinion. 20% of it is them evaluating, do you know the deal? Do you know what you're doing? Do you have a plan of action? Do you have an exit plan? They want to see an exit plan. They're not just going to keep this money in there forever. What's your plan for either selling the property or refining the property? Do you have a plan for, what are the comps? How much work do you need to do to the property? Do your numbers match up of what you're saying needs to be done to the property versus what your rehab budget is? What are the comps? What's the resale value? I've seen people get tripped up by not really following through all the way on that bit, the 20%, the numbers part. Kind of think of it like Shark Tank. When you watch Shark Tank, they can have a really, really good pitch, and then when they get to the kind of the tail end, when they start talking about the numbers for the business, sometimes the really good promotions end up falling by the wayside because they start looking at the numbers and going, well, this sounds like a good idea, but your numbers are terrible. Same thing here. So, and we'll get to that other 80% in a minute, but for the 20%, you have to have your numbers laid out. So an example of that would be, I've seen someone come in and pitch a private investor that I was representing and get 80% of the way there, and they were ready to do the deal, but the example property that you gave of, oh, well, here's a project I did last year. We bought it, we rehabbed, and we sold it within 6 months. Great. I did fact checking on the project that they gave us to show their track record, and the project that the guy said took him 6 months really took him a year and a half when I looked up the county records and fact checked them. So needless to say, that investor said, well, you falsified what your timeline was on this project, and this is the project that you gave me to show me like what you're capable of doing. And number one, you lied. Number two, you said it took 6 months, took a year and a half for you to do a rehab. Like, I'm not in for that. Another example, I've seen someone come in with a really, really good property, really, really good opportunity, and then they get down to the numbers and they haven't accurately reflected all of the costs are involved. So usually when you're dealing with an investor, they're pretty savvy on what all the numbers are. That's the one thing that they're typically good at. And if you're going through your numbers on the resale and you don't have all the closing costs in there, if you're saying, well, look, we're gonna buy this thing for $100,000, we're gonna do a 50 grand rehab, and it's gonna be worth 200,000, so we're gonna walk away with 50 grand cash. Well, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Where's the commission? Where's the tax proration? Where's the title fees? Where's the attorney's fees? Are you going to stage it? Are you going to get professional photography done when you put it on the market? Where's all of that in there? You're not incorporating any of that in there. Where's the holding cost for what you're going to have to pay for the hard money loan that you're asking for? Where's all that broken down in there? If you're selling it for $200,000, you're not walking. If you're in it for $150 and you're selling it for $200, you're not walking with 50 grand. You got to pay all the closing costs on there. So factor that in there. I've seen people do that and get tripped up, or at that point the investor's looking at them like, look, I like you, but you don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what you're doing yet. So go figure it out and then come back when you know what the real numbers are on this project. So I've seen people get tripped up on that type of thing. I also have seen people get tripped up where they come in. I had this last year. He seemed like a nice kid, but he had this project. All the numbers were lining up, and we said, well, let's see what your rehab estimate is. He's saying, oh, it just, it only needs 15 grand worth of work. Okay, this is a flip. He's saying all it needs is a little bit of light plumbing work and some tile work, and then we got to paint it, and it needs a new roof. I mean, the roof alone might be the 15 grand. If you've ever professionally had a house painted, I mean, it's not cheap. If you're, what we're calling light plumbing and tile work, that might not be cheap. So, it still needed some basic things. We're gonna have to go in and put like some granite counters and stuff like that in there. So he was way off base. I don't know where he thought he was pulling these rehab numbers from, but he was way off. And the investor's looking at me like this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So you have to have that 20% of your numbers down solid. You have to have a track record. You have to be able to present to the investor, look, here's some deals I've done before. Not to say if you don't have a track record yet, you can't get a private investor, but it's more of a hill you have to climb to get over you not being able to show what you've done in the past. If you could show any type of track record, it helps. They could see, okay, he's or she's been involved with something before and they know how to do stuff. All right. So the other 80%, is they're evaluating you as a person. They're looking at you and determining, do I trust this person with my money? Far and away, that's how you're going to attract private investors. Is they're going to, typically someone's going to meet you face to face. They're going to like you. They're going to believe in your vision. They're going to believe in, share your values. They're going to believe in what you're trying to do with the property. And they're going to support you. And they're going to want to invest in you. They're still investing in the property because you've showed them your numbers, you showed them your track record. But in my opinion, 80% of it is they have to believe and trust in you, the person who's going to execute the project. So you need to be able to convey to them that you're going to be able to complete the project. When I sit one-on-one with investors and I counsel them, more often than not, here's the next misconception you just strip away. More often than not, and I see people miss this point, the investor is telling me that they want to know if they can rely upon you that you're going to see the project through to the end. Obviously, they want to make money. They want to make sure that they're secured. So we might, want to put a mortgage on the property. We might want to do any number of things to secure them. Investors want to know two things. Number one, if the project goes sideways, are you in a position, are you capable, are you willing to come out of pocket to finish the project? Number two, if the project goes sideways, are you going to ghost them and take off and leave them holding the property, or are you going to see it through to the end? A cash investor, private money, whatever you want to call them, wants to know that they're investing in this project and that they have no responsibility. They're just giving the money. They're putting up usually most of the money. They're getting interest on their money, and they don't have to be bothered with anything. They don't want to be taking contractor phone calls. They don't want to know day-to-day stuff. Here's the money. Keep me updated on how it's going. See it through to the end. Let me know when we close. That's simply it, or when the refi is, or whatever. They might want like a monthly report of what's going on so they could see how you're using their money. But ultimately, they're doing this because they don't want to be bogged down. They want to do maybe a rehab or whatever, but they don't want to be bogged down with the day-to-day. They got other stuff to do. They can't deploy that time. So they're giving you the money because you have the time and you don't have the money. They have the money, they don't have the time. So that's the relationship with each other. Remember, we talked very early, one of the first videos is knowing who you are in the process. Knowing who you are in the process is knowing what your strengths are, one of your limitations. The strength of you, the person who's borrowing the money, is that you have time, but you don't, your limitation is you don't have money. The private investor's strength is they have money. The limitation is they don't have time. So you're fitting those things together. Remember, the analogy we used was like a jigsaw puzzle. It fits together. So that's how that relationship is supposed to work. In return, they want to know that Remember, they have the money, they don't have the time. So what's their risk assessment? Their risk assessment is, I need to know that this isn't going to turn into something that's now going to soak up my time, because I don't have time to deploy into this. Otherwise, I would do the rehab myself. So they want to know that you're going to commit to it, you're going to see it through, you're going to complete it, and if a problem comes up, you are going to take responsibility for it, complete it, and get it sold or refied or whatever you need to do, instead of sticking them with the property. The investors do not want to be caught ever in a position where they now have to take ownership or responsibility for the property in order to liquidate their money. We don't ever want to be in that position. If you do that to a private investor, go ahead and delete their email, delete their phone number on your phone, because don't ever plan on ever pitching them on a project ever again, because you're never going to get it. I have had people have a project go sideways. They took responsibility for it and said, look, it didn't work out. We're going to lose money on it. Here's my plan of action. And we're able to still cultivate the relationship with the private investor by laying out, what happened, what went wrong. Here's how we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm going to make you whole. I'm still going to pay you off, but I'm going to have to come out of pocket, but I want you to know that. And I still want to be able to keep moving forward. So that's important. That's an important aspect when you're pitching a private investor. That makes them feel better. If you can satisfy that, everything, all the other concerns, everything else goes away. So if you're pitching a private investor and it's just endless questions and endless questions, you've been going back and forth for months and months, and no matter what you say doesn't satisfy them, it means they don't trust you and they're probably not going to invest with you. And there's nothing, if you had the best investment in the world, they're not going to give you any money, because clearly if they have to keep going back and forth with you, they're not going to trust you. I can tell you from experience, I've had a private investor decide to invest on a deal over a drink at a bar, over lunch, over just hanging out and talking about something. If they believe in you, it could be a very casual thing. It doesn't have to be this really strenuous business meeting environment. I've seen guys in flip-flops and shorts, come to agreement on deals like this. I worked out a deal for a private investment on a fix and flip over a whiskey at Hub 51. So it's stuff like that can go together very casually. It doesn't have to be a strenuous thing, because if you can hit the 80% threshold of them believing and trusting in you, and then you have that 20% of the numbers to back it up, you're in business, you're ready to go. All right. Let's talk about why someone becomes a private investor, and then we'll get to the million-dollar question, where do you find a private investor? All right, why does someone become a private investor? We already kind of touched on this a little bit. They have money, they don't have time. They want exposure to real estate, they don't know how to do a rehab. They would like to do a rehab, but they don't know how to talk to a contractor. They want to get exposure to an apartment building, they've never bought one before. And they don't have time. Because if you have the time, you can learn how to do that stuff, you can partner. But if you're just doing a private investment typically means you're giving them the money and you're taking a back seat at that point. If you're doing private investment, that means that you have a time limitation and you have funds to apply. And I've found you have a lack of knowledge in a particular base, and then you don't have time as well, or a time limitation. So you know that when you're talking to an investor, that should be their motivation. If you're dealing with someone who has time, who has the money, and they have the time, it can be hard to convince them why they should do it, because they're wondering in the back of their head the whole time you're pitching them on the deal, why don't I just do this? Why don't I do it? So I don't like going that avenue. I find that you end up wasting a lot of time with that. We want someone that very simply, look, we're not trying to compete with one another. Again, the puzzle analogy, it should fit together like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. I shouldn't have to satisfy you thinking, do I want to invest with this guy, or I could just do this myself? Look, you either have time to do it or you don't. If you want to do this yourself, we could talk to you about doing it, with us, doing a partnership, do whatever, but then you're not a private investor. You want to be involved with the active investing of the property. You want the private investor to be someone who identifies I would like to do this, I would like to be a part of this, I just can't commit to being at the property. I can't commit to talking to contractors. I can't commit to any of that. I got other stuff going on, but I want to go in on this with you because I believe in what you're doing, or I really like this specific deal that you found, whatever the case may be. So that's what a private investor is. So private investors can be any age. I've had private investors in their 20s. I've had private investors in their 80s. They vary all over the board. So don't get caught up in a particular age gap. When you're dealing with the 401k, self-directed 401k IRA people, typically I found they vary around the ages of maybe in their middle to upper 40s, early 50s, because that's usually around the age that they've reached a point where that account has now accumulated enough money that they're looking into this. When you're dealing with someone in their 30s, typically they're just really getting started with getting a decent amount of money in that retirement account, and they want to allow it to continue to compound. So that would be my only parameter. If you're isolating those type of people, typically you're going to want to let them get to at least in their 40s so that they have a decent amount of money to play around with. We don't want to put anyone in a position either where we're taking completely depleting all their retirement account. Ideally, we want them to have money in other places, and we've set aside a set amount of money for this real estate venture that we're doing. So we want to be safe with this. Outside of that, an investor can be any age, color, creed, sex, anything. I've had all different variations from all over the world, from all different, every type of human walking this earth I've encountered at some point that is invested in real estate. So you can find them anywhere. There's no, I have to go in this area or this particular pocket or this, they're all over. There's investors everywhere. All right, so now let's get to the $1 million question, the where. Where do you find an investor? This is the biggest misconception. This is the biggest problem. This is the biggest thing we have to overcome. This is the biggest lie that you've probably been told. If you have gone to events, and I've gone to a few to kind of scope out what other people are selling, they'll say that they're going to talk about private investing, and then 2-3 hours go by and they never really got to talking about private investing, and time is up, but buy my book. We're going to get into it right now. I'm going to tell you why they avoid the question. I'm going to tell you why they don't want to answer it. I'm going to tell you why they don't want to offer it up and they want you to buy their book first, because they want to make sure that they get money from you before they tell you the truth. And the truth is, private investors are everywhere and they're nowhere at the same time. That probably made no sense to you. Private investors are everywhere around you, all day, all the time. You just don't know it. Private investors are at your grocery store. They're sitting next to you in the dentist's office. They're buying toothpaste next to you at Walgreens. They're everywhere around you, but at the same time, they're nowhere, because it's extremely hard to identify them. It's extremely hard to isolate them. It's extremely hard to know that they are a for real investor, not a fake investor, someone who doesn't have money, but they want to waste a lot of your time talking about it, but they're never actually going to fund it. There's a lot of that. So you have to be careful. We want to isolate people who actually have cash to deploy that are interested in real estate. So you're thinking at this point, well, this all sounds very confusing. Well, it kind of is. It's not, but it sounds like it's confusing. We have to strip it down and make it very simple. If you're trying to chase down a private investor, you need to essentially throw up a flag of who you are and let them approach you. If you try to chase private investors, you're going to have an extremely, extremely difficult time. Private investors, once they get on the radar, once they get on an agent, an investor, someone who does fix and flip, someone who invests in properties, once they get on someone's radar of, okay, hey, here's someone who has invested in real estate or likes real estate or is interested in real estate, they get absolutely inundated with emails, phone calls, text messages, nonsense in the mail. They just get bombarded. Once they get on the radar of someone who's interested in this, they get overwhelmed. I've seen guys' inboxes where every morning they get 50 emails. Hey, I got this, I have this deal, I have this one, I have this deal, I have this property, I have this, I have this. And 49 of them are crap, and one is like semi-decent. And they have to just go through every day and deleting those emails. So if you're dealing with someone who's already sort of gotten on the radar that they're interested in being a private investor, you have to sort of filter through the noise and get their attention, which can be difficult. So if you're chasing them, it's very hard. It's a very hard hill to climb. What's better, what I've seen work for people time and time again, you can do one of two ways. You can either canvass an entire neighborhood, say, hey, I'm interested in talking to private investors. If you're a private investor, let me know. The difficulty with that is now you need to qualify the investor, because like I said, there's a lot of scam artists out there. There's a lot of people who want to say they're a private investor and commit to it, and then you find out that they don't have the money, that they were going to get the money from someone else and then deploy it and use it with you, and then they can't bring the money to the table. They made false promises, or they just don't have money. And I've seen that happen before, where we go to the closing table and the other party just doesn't have the money. They just don't send it, and then they just stop answering their phone calls, and then it's like Kaiser Sose, they disappear. So you need to be careful. I'm not crazy about the canvassing, because that you need to have systems in place where you can qualify them, so you can make sure that you're not wasting your time. So what's the next thing you can do? The next thing you can do is you can put yourself in a position where you attract private investors. How do you do that? The first thing I tell someone when they come to me, they say, well, so I advise private investors to say, all right, I want to become a private investor. What do I do? And we advise them on that. And then we get people saying, well, I need a private investor. And I say, all right, the first thing you need to know to attract private investors is you need to learn how to become your own best cheerleader. It's very important. You need to learn how to become your own PR, your own cheerleader, your own everything. You need to put yourself out there. If you're rehabbing properties, you need to be able to put yourself out there of, hey, look at this project, I bought it, here's the status of the rehab, and most importantly, here's the end product. Here's what it looks like when it's finished, because anyone can start a rehab, but not a lot of people can finish it and make it look really good when you finish it on a budget. That's the difficult part. So you want to be able to show the end product, or if you want to do investment property, be able to show, hey, we went in on this property together. Today's the day we're refining into the stabilized commercial mortgage. Here's the amount of money now we're going to have on this project that's cash flowing, that we're going to be partners in on going forward, and now that we're going to go on to the next project, and show them that you were able to execute the exit plan. You want to be able to show them that you can execute the exit plan, that you can see it through to the end. When they see your success story, when they see that you're actually doing it, you're not talking about it, they see that you're doing it, that you're executing it, you already have a system in place, you have a plan in place, you have a team in place. The only thing that you need is for someone to just come in and say, here's some more money, keep doing what you're doing, and just do it bigger and better with my money. That's the ideal scenario. That's how you do it. I know that's probably not the answer that some of you want to hear. I'm just giving you the reality of what it is. You need to be able to show what you're doing, what your track record is, and some guys are really, and girls, sorry, guys and girls are both really good at this. Success brings more success. Money brings more money. Same thing with private investors is very true with hard money lenders, with banks, with everything. The rule of thumb I always have with banks, they really want to lend money to people who don't need money. Same thing is true with a private investor. Ideally, they want to lend money to someone who doesn't need the money, because if then something goes wrong, they have cash on hand to complete it, do whatever they need to do. They don't want you to be broke and relying just on their money, because now you're a risk that you could ghost them, skip town, do whatever, because you don't have anything else going on. They want to feel like you don't really need the money, you just can use the money. So that's why you're portraying your success, your team, your product flow, that you have properties in queue, that you have a pipeline in the works, and all they need to do is just set it and forget it. Just, here's my money. Keep me posted on how things are going. I see you already have a good thing set up. You have a good thing going. Just send me a monthly email. Let me know things are all right. Let me know when I can come pick up my check at the closing. That's the ideal scenario. One quick thing on closings. I have found when you're setting these deals up, we'll talk about it a little tomorrow in partnerships. When you're setting these deals up, the investors feel much more secure and they feel much better if they are sending the money to a title company for the closing versus dropping you off a check in person. If you have a good relationship and they really trust you, they're fine with giving you a check. Usually the first time out, though, I found that investors feel a little bit more secure if you set this up in a way where, or we set it up in a way where the money's being sent to the title company for the purchase of the property, and then the title company's cutting the check to them for doing the rehab or doing whatever they're doing. It gives them a sense of like a paper trail. It gives them a sense of legitimacy to what you're doing, and they don't have to worry that they're just going to give you your check and again that you're going to skip town, you're going to disappear. It gives them more of a sense of security with everything that you're doing. So just that heads up. But I've also had clients literally walk into my office, hand me a check, and walk out, and they're like, let me know when it closes. So it happens. It's both ways. But again, that's a level of trust. That's an investor who feels secure with the other person who's doing the project and just drops off the check and let me know how it goes. Again, a lot of this comes down to trust. So it's very hard to, the other analogy I use, and some people scoff at this, but and there's, you may disagree, but most cats I've ever had are not, they're friendly when they want to be friendly, but when they don't want to be friendly, they're like, go away, get away from me. Dogs are always in the mood to get play, pet, whatever. They want to snuggle with you on the couch. I think of a private investor like a cat. You're thinking of a private investor like a dog, that you can attract them and you can call them to you. The harder you try to call a private investor to you, the more they're going to ignore you. Because the private investor is more like the cat. The more you call the cat's just going to be looking at you like, you're stupid. Every cat I've had, you're stupid. But if you sit on the couch and you completely ignore them and you just do what you're doing, they'll just come up to you. And now, they're in the mood to, have them scratch your head, scratch their head or whatever. That's always been my experience with the private investor. The more you attack them, the more they want nothing to do with you. But if you just leave them and do what you're doing, do what you would normally be doing anyway, but make sure that they see what you're doing. Make sure you're on Instagram and you're on Facebook, or you're doing whatever you need to do so that they can see what you're doing. They will come to you. They will approach you. I've had people do a really good job on a rehab, and literally people will just walk in off the street and say, this looks great. How can I, partner up with you on your next one, or give you money for the next deal, or whatever. That's the best way you're going to attract them. You can't force them into you. I'll tell you the other issue. If I've forced relationships, to say I found an investor and I found a private investor, and then I had an investor who wanted to do like a rehab, and I sort of forced a relationship together. This is why I don't do this very much anymore. Only if they already know each other. Maybe I'll say, hey, this other guy's doing one. Maybe you want to call him. But I don't force the relationship, because if you force them to go together and they haven't established that trust, that bond that they need to have together, it leads to a lot of fighting. It leads to almost immediately there will be fighting. As soon as the money leaves someone's account, they'll be fighting. Or they'll say, I don't like the fixtures that he picked, so I'm not going to send him the money. Or, I got a call and they want to buy, $30,000 worth of stuff at Home Depot, and I'm not giving them, my money. I think that they bought the wrong stuff or whatever. There's a breakdown of trust where they start nitpicking. And your private investor shouldn't be sitting down going, well, I'm not happy with the fixtures he picked. Who cares? I mean, why do you care what fixture? If you care about what fixtures they're picking, then go buy your own property and do your own flip. But if you just want to be the private investor and you're just sending the money, that's their job to figure that out. Stop worrying about that. Just take a back seat and calm down. You're the money guy. If you want to be involved with picking things out and what color the cabinets are going to be and all that, well, now you're the project manager, you're the rehabber, so just do your own project then. You can't jump in and out of your role. So unfortunately I see that a lot. So that's the best advice I can give you. I know it's probably not the advice you want to hear. Now that we're at minute 45, so I'm going to give you the dirty secret. For those of you who stuck with the video and you watched us to the end, I'm going to give you the dirty secret of real estate. I'm very protective of attorney-client privilege. I don't give out my clients' personal information. So I'm not talking about any specific client. I'm not talking about the majority of clients, but I am talking about a fair number of people that I know that have either invested in rental properties using other people's money, OPM, or invested in fix and flips using other people's money, OPM, with a mixture of private investors. If you haven't figured it out by now, if you're following along, you're keeping track of the timeline, you're making notes, you notice I left out a gap there. There's a gap there. I want you to take a second. I want you to think, what was the gap that I left out? Can you figure it out? What was the gap that I left out? I'll give you another second. There was a giant gap that I left out. And what was it? In this entire, in the timeline of this process. All right, here's what it is. How are you supposed to attract a private investor if you don't have experience or you haven't established a track record? Here's the dirty secret. Most investors that I've worked with that started from square one, just starting out, first project out, they usually either have money from a family member or a friend or some variation of, maybe a college roommate, an uncle, something like that. A lot of people, that's their first project, is they have to have a close friend or family member fund it. Then, once they've done that first project, now they have the track record that they can use to build off of to get an actual investor to invest in their project. But more often than not, I gotta be honest, that's how they start out. When they say, I want to get started investing in real estate, and I say, well, how are we going to put this together? And they go, well, I have some investors. Okay. And then when we're preparing for closing, I say, well, who's this private investor? We got to get we have to get the mortgage and the note put together. Do we need a partnership agreement? Who's this investor? Well, it's my dad, or it's my uncle, or it's my college roommate that works at a hedge fund and has tons of cash, or it's my grandmother who has a ton of money and she wants to see her grandchild do well in doing something, so she's going to take a chance investing on me in this, or any combination of those. That's the foothold. That's the start. If you don't have someone like that in your life, that's the hurdle you're going to have to figure out how to get past, because most of the people that you've seen that are doing it, that was their first deal. I know that because I did the closing and I put all the documentation together. So I know that they're pretending that they didn't use, their cousin's money for doing their first fix and flip. And then they advertised it like crazy about the project they were doing, so that before the project was done, they at least had some sphere of influence of people who were interested in doing the next project. So what do you do if you don't have that? You need to network like crazy and go back to what I said before, the 80% of them trusting you. You're going to need to read and research like crazy to solidify that 20% of knowing your numbers. Because remember, I've seen people get tripped up, and I've had examples of people coming in and we're 80% of the way there. The private investor liked them. They thought that they were a good person. They had good heart. They had shared the same values. They had the ability. And then they did their numbers. Their numbers were terrible. So you got to know your numbers. You got to know what it takes, what it costs, what your closing costs are going to be, what title fees are going to be. You need to know all that. And if you don't know, reach out and we can help answer those questions for you so you understand what I'm talking about. And then if you have your numbers and you can hit that 80% where they like you and they believe in you, you can get people to take a chance on you. But you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to work 10 times harder to overcome the lack of the track record. Just know that. You're gonna have to work 10 times harder to overcome the assumption that you don't know what you're doing. Prove to them that they should take a chance on you. More often than not, the successful people that I've worked with, the people who are now semi-retired in real estate, typically used family money to get themselves established, and then use that to create a portfolio, create a track record. And some people literally have like a binder, like a physical portfolio that shows the pictures of here's what it looks like when I bought it. Here's the pictures during the rehab. Here's the breakdown of what I paid for, the receipts. Here's the pictures of what it looked like after, and here's the settlement statement when I bought it, and here's the settlement statement when I sold it, so that everything's laid out on the table. Some people actually come in with a physical binder. I love that. I'm old school where sometimes I just really like to look at paper. So if you could do that, I think is awesome. It's not some people. I feel like some people think that's hokey or corny. I don't think it's corny at all. I think that's awesome. If you come in with a physical binder, like this stuff I did, I think that's amazing. I think it's fantastic. You should absolutely do that. Don't get caught up in the idea that everything needs to be virtual and everything needs to be a PDF. If you think you're going to meet with an investor, be like, here's my portfolio. Here's the last 3 deals I did. Call me. Get up and walk out. Let them chase you. Make the cat come to you. It works so much better. So work on that. I think I love it when people do that. I'm on my computer all day long. I have 8,000 PDFs. I only have a handful of paper actual portfolios on my desk. So even if you just do that, you're going to stand out. People will like it. I guarantee you, people will like that. Get in the door, get something going, build on the track record, and then advertise yourself like crazy. You have to be your biggest PR person. You have to be your biggest cheerleader and show them what you do, what you're capable of. And people will find you. People will seek you out. People will call you. I've literally had people call and said, hey, I saw this guy online. I really like what he's doing. Can you call him and just say I have, like $100,000 whenever he's ready to do his next project? I've literally had that. Not exaggerating. That's how sometimes it goes together. So if you're already doing projects, if you're watching this and you've done 10 rehabs and you still haven't gotten private money yet, then you're doing it wrong. Either your rehabs are ugly, and part of that, that's a part of it. The rehabs have to look pretty. If you do like kind of shady looking rehabs, they're not going to want to invest with you. If it looks really pretty, you're doing like something that looks like it belongs on HGTV, it looks really beautiful, you're absolutely going to want to invest with you. You need to get out there and advertise yourself. A lot of you are not promoting yourself enough. A lot of you are not putting yourself out there. There's people, some of you are doing rehabs and you're clients of mine, so if you're watching this, I know who you are. You're doing rehabs full time and no one would even know that you're a rehabber if they looked at any of your social media profiles or anything. You haven't even updated, your LinkedIn profile or anything. It still has your old job that you quit 5 years ago. No one would have any idea that you're rehabbing properties. You have to put yourself out there. You have to put yourself out there and show what you're doing. You have to show everything. Sometimes, we do a budget rehab that we're not necessarily proud of, or we kind of cut some corners. I get that. We have those once in a while. We're just like, nah, we can get by with the bare minimum. This one is not going to look sexy, but we're going to make money on it. I get that. But if you got a really sexy one, you need to put it out there. You need to promote yourself. All right. So that's private investing in a nutshell. That's everything that you ever wanted to know that you were never told. They don't want to tell you because they can't hand it to you. It's one of the few things in real estate that I cannot hand to you on a silver platter. You got to do it yourself. I can get you 90% of the way there. That's the last 10% that you have to do. I can get you to the finish line, but you have to get across that last little bit yourself of attracting a private investor. I can't do that for you. I can do most of the other stuff for you or with you. That's the part you got to do yourself. Now, I can be part of the meeting and help you with the pitch, and showing them, what the package is going to look like, what the how we're going to secure with the mortgage on title and do all that kind of stuff. I can help with that, but you still got to go out and find your investors. I can't bring them to the table for you. That's on you. All right, so that's private investment in a nutshell. That's private money in a nutshell. Tomorrow will be joint ventures and partnership agreements. So you got your private investor. Awesome. That's the gold standard of real estate, is having your private investor. We love it when we get a private investor. It lowers your closing costs. Remember we talked about hard money yesterday. You have the $100,000 property, the $50,000 rehab, but when you do the hard money, you really only might be walking away with $40,000 of the rehab money because they build in the closing costs. The beauty of the private money lender is the $50,000 is the $50,000. There might be a little bit of closing costs, but very little. So you're getting the maximum amount of your rehab budget. That's the other added bonus involved here. Plus it's easier. You got the money, ready to go. Tomorrow, now we're going to talk about, so you have them. Congratulations. Now, how do we put the deal together? What if they don't want to just be a private investor? What if they want a joint venture agreement? What if they want to be a partner on the deal? How do we break that down? Come back tomorrow. We're going to talk about that. And then Friday will be recreational marijuana and real estate. Recreational marijuana is now legal in Illinois. We're going to talk about what its impact on real estate is. And then I will see you at the U.S. Bank Multifamily Investor Summit on Saturday at University of Chicago. I'll be part of the panel talking about marijuana and real estate, and then I'll be at one of the tables outside. If you just want to come up, tell me you've been enjoying the videos, whatever. If you have any questions, I'll be there, and I will see you tomorrow.